Well, welcome to Elevenses. It's show number 248. It's Wednesday, 22nd of June, and looking out the window, it is a lovely morning here in London at the moment. Got a fairly packed show for you today. I've actually had to drop one of the items that I was going to cover, the CCM classic tracker. I'll come back to that on the next show because I just got too much to talk about this morning, actually. So what do we have today? Well, we have bikes under £10,000 continue to attract the EV grant, even though the government has dropped that grant for cars. If you're traveling to France, there are still difficulties with the carnets, and you'll also need something called a crit d'air vignette, which a few riders seem to be aware of. The fatal TT crash misidentification has been resolved. It was down to riders wearing the wrong dog tags. Nuisance bikers have injured children on a footpath in Newcastle, and in Worcester a bike has been seized and crushed. Triumph have bought a Sussex-based off-road electric bike manufacturer, and today's discussion point is all about cross-hatchings and why we should think twice about overtaking on them. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 to 40 minutes as I go through all those points. Don't forget, you are tuned to Elevenses. I am Kevin Williams, and this is my twice weekly live webcast. Clive and Cheryl have both looked in. Good morning to you both. Excellent to see you. So, right, on with the show. Now, the first mini ride out I was planning to run for this month was actually scheduled for Saturday, 10th. I shall throw me the brains in neutral at the moment. 10 a.m. on Saturday, and the idea was to meet at Beaconsfield and head out into the Oxfordshire countryside. Now, due to some cancellations, I still have a couple of places left, so if you do fancy a ride, go and have a look at the link up on the top of the show. The bad news is, however, that the weather isn't looking like it's going to play ball, but it is Wimbledon coming up, so I'm afraid that's no great surprise. So if you are booked in it, keep an eye on the forecast. I may well cancel. If you're not booked on it, you can still grab a place, but be aware that if the weather looks poor, we won't be going anywhere. Right, now, one piece of news I missed last week was that the plug-in car grant has been axed by the government. On Tuesday, June 14th, Transport Minister Judy Harrison said the £1,500 electric car grant scheme would end. Now, the DfT did always make clear that the grant was temporary and that it would not go beyond 2022-23, and it has been also reduced over time, but the indications were that it would go forward to 2023. But fully electric car sales have actually risen 70% in the last year, and they now make up 1 in 6 of all new cars being sold in the UK. The Department for Transport also said that sales of fully electric cars rose from less than 1,000 in the whole of 2011 to almost 100,000 in the first 5 months of June of 2022. So combined, battery and hybrid electric vehicles now make up more than half of all new cars sold. The government says that it will now refocus on the main barriers to EV transition, and an obvious target there, of course, is to improve the public charging infrastructure with the goal of eliminating range anxiety. So Ms Harrison said that resources would be refocused and that 300 million of grant funding will be directed towards extending the grants for plug-in motorcycles, taxis, vans, trucks and wheelchair accessible vehicles. She said, having successfully kick-started the electric car market, we now want to use plug-in grants to match the success across other vehicle types, from taxis to delivery vans and everything in between, to help make the switch to zero-emission travel cheaper and easier. Now, the bad news is that the electric motorcycles over £10,000 no longer attract any grant at all. So if you were looking to buy something like the Harley-Davidson Livewire 1, or the top of the range Zeros, then you're out of luck. The grant does, however, apply to motorcycles priced up to £10,000, and you will get 35% off the list price up to a maximum of £500 on those machines. Mopeds get 35% off up to a maximum of £150. Now, this does mean that the motorcycle sales show that bigger electric bikes are down on last year when the grant for those bigger machines actually finished. And MCN recently said they're struggling, basically. March's registration data for the 15 to 35 kilowatt bikes down 50% on 2021, because that was, of course, the point at which people were struggling to finalize their deals before the grant was axed on those bigger machines. And the 35 kilowatt plus machines, they are down by 37%. Now, removing the grant for the more expensive bikes, it has had an impact. That's not an arguable point, I don't think. But it's easy to suggest that the low figures are because buyers don't want to buy electric motorcycles, but I think it's actually more reasonable to say that there's little choice if you're not happy with the lesser known brands. Yes, Zero are out there. Yes, Harley do have their live wire. But, aside from that, there really are no impact at all from the mainstream manufacturers, apart from a couple of scooters and the live wire, of course, from Harley. But none of the mainstream motorcycle manufacturers yet produces a proper electric motorcycle, and I suspect that's got more to do with the lackluster sales figures for these bikes than anything else. In the small commuter end of the market, where sales are actually booming, I suspect that punters are far more likely to take a chance with a no-name brand than probably experienced motorcyclists will. There's certainly an antipathy towards buying Chinese machines at the moment. Right, Kevin's also looked in. Good morning, Kevin. Thank you for coming along today. Now, I've previously reported on issues regarding bikes being taken to the EU on a trailer or in a van. And whilst the EU has been working to solve the documentation problems, motorcyclists still have problems at the border with France. And the BMF are the latest to update their advice for British bikers going to Europe. The BMF chair, Jim Freeman, said yesterday, "I'm sure this will be addressed. The question is when." He said, "In the meantime, the best solution with a road-registered bike is to ride it into Europe. If you must transport it by van or trailer, an ATA carnet will be the best option." Now, I've since learned that ATA carnets are not the only paperwork British motorcyclists are having to deal with at the moment, and this is a problem which I previously wasn't aware of. Let me get the picture up on screen. I'll get there in just a moment. Here we go. This is the thing I wanted to show you. There it is. It's the French emission control zones. And to enter those, you actually need a clean air sticker, technically known as a Certificat Qualité de l'Air, popularly called Crit Air vignettes. They form a multi-category sticker system that's used to identify the vehicle's air pollution emissions. The least polluting vehicles get preferential access and parking. The dirtiest basically get banned from these permanent and emergency low emission zones. Now, there are 6 categories in this system, ranging through green for the cleanest to grey for the dirtiest, and they relate directly to the Euro emission standards. So the green ones are zero emission vehicles, electric and hydrogen. Orange, for example, is that they're level 3, and that equates to a Euro 4 vehicle. And dark grey, the Crit-Air 5, is a Euro 2. All eligible vehicles need to display one of these vignettes on the vehicle itself, on the windscreen, to be able to drive and park in the restricted zones. Now, you'll notice that I didn't mention vehicles that don't actually meet the Euro 2 standard. And what that basically means is not every vehicle is eligible to get a vignette. Cars registered before January 1997, which rules out my camper incidentally, and motorbikes and scooters registered before June 2000 are ineligible and cannot be driven at all where the restrictions are in force. Now, I believe, but I'm checking and will update you if I find any different, the permanent low emission zones at the moment are implemented in 3 cities: Paris, Strasbourg and Grenoble. But there are 28 emergency zones which come in and out on a temporary basis and are implemented when there is high pollution levels. And those are the ones to watch out for, and they cover quite a lot of the country. Now, a critère vignette varies depending on where you buy one. Within France, for example, the stickers are €3.62, including postage. In the UK, it's €3.11. I'm not quite sure why that seems to be lower. Maybe there's a misprint in the article and it should be pounds. I don't know. But anyway, you have to pay international postage on top of that. Now, you can apply online for these critère vignettes on the official government website. You'll need to upload a scan of your V5C registration document to show the emission level of the vehicle, and the ordering process can take up to 6 weeks, so I would order well ahead of time. Now, one source says you can also buy them in big French hypermarkets in the motoring aisle. I don't know if that's correct, but do watch out for inflated prices on UK sites. I found one charging £20, £4 for the sticker and a £16 handling charge. Now, the sticker should be placed on the windscreen, but failing that, a fork leg seems to be fine. So fines of 68 to €135, roughly 60 to £120, are in place for vehicles that don't display the appropriate sticker and or get driven into areas where they shouldn't be. So do bear that in mind if you are heading to France. That's a new one on me. I hadn't heard about that before. Right, okay, so Dave Kilty's looked in, as well as Nigel. Good morning, Dave. Hope, yeah, all the best to you, Dave, out there in New Zealand. Nice to see you here. Right, okay, so don't forget, you are watching Elevenses with Kevin Williams here. If you've got any comments, any questions, anything you want to say, I will try and get back to you during the show. If I can't get to you during the show, I will always answer after if I possibly can. Right, next story. Well, you probably know that on at the TT races this year, there was an incident where the death of the wrong competitor was announced following a fatal crash in a sidecar race. The race was red flagged and abandoned, and the statement said that passenger Olivier Lavorel had died and that driver César Chanel was in a critical condition. But a subsequent statement during the week confirmed that the identity of the deceased had been mistaken, and it was actually the driver César Chanel who died. And the inquest is now going on into the fatal crash, and what they found was that the French crew had actually somehow swapped over their dog tags. Now, by TT regulations, all racers must carry an ID tag, which has to be presented to the scrutineer before a racer can actually take part in the session. And it seems a dog tag bearing the name Olivier Lavorel was found in Chanel's leathers, which is why he was named as the deceased. And the inquest also heard that the emergency room had struggled to identify Lavorel due to his injuries and the fact that they found Chanel's dog tag in his leathers. Now, sadly, this year's TT did claim 5 lives, the most deaths since 1989. And that prompted a statement from TT clerk of the course, Gary Thompson. And he said that after every incident, we work tirelessly to understand the circumstances, establish key learning, and implement changes as soon as possible. Any fatality during an event is a tragedy. As an organisation, we promise to take any actions that can help improve safety and undertake this at the earliest opportunity. Right, okay. Moving back to the UK, nuisance motorcycling continues to be a problem up and down the country. And in a rather distressing incident on Hadrian's Way cycle path in Newcastle, 2 children aged 10 and 11 were seriously injured in an incident involving a motorcycle on the evening of Monday the 13th of June. Now, police were alerted to this shortly before 7:15, but before they arrived, the motorcycle believed to have been involved in the collision had actually been removed from the area. It was later found and recovered, and 2 men aged 38 and 30 have been arrested in connection with this incident and was said to be in custody. And an investigation is underway to establish how the children, a boy and a girl, were injured in the incident. And Northumbria Police are, not surprisingly, appealing for information and anybody who may have CCTV or dashcam footage that can help. Meanwhile, police in Worcester confiscated and crushed a motorbike. Youths had been using it to speed up and down a residential road and around a park, and the bike was seized. It was a rather battered looking Bullet 125 in blue and black, identified as the one being ridden around the park and destroyed. The local parish councillor wasn't happy though. He said that, like others, he said, I see little point in crushing the bike unless it's unroadworthy. Why not sell or auction it with the proceeds going to charity? Well, frankly, had it been worth anything, yes, that may have been an idea, but I doubt it would have fetched much more than 100 quid. The local residents and the council themselves are now looking into blocking entry parks into that point with gates to prevent bikes accessing the park, which I really think quite a sad state of affairs, isn't it? Right, don't forget, you can set a reminder to grab this show. It goes out every Wednesday and Sunday at 11 AM UK time, of course, for those of you not watching from the UK. You can catch up here on Facebook or over on my YouTube channel, which is Survival Skills, with that all-important UK on the end, where they are in their own playlist and you can watch them all over there in your own time. Now, days after it was announced that Norton were the recipients of government funding for electric bikes, it seems Triumph Motorcycles are determined not to be left behind. You know that they have been busily trialling their EV1, but they've just purchased a company called Osset Electric Bikes. Now, if I can get the photo up for this, I will do so. Hang on a minute. Ugh. Right. The things are not playing ball today. Right, okay. Hopefully, we will now be able to see a photo if I manage to get the damn thing up. I will get there in the end. Hang on a minute. Right, that should be it. Now, that's an overlay graphic which sits on Osset's homepage and proudly proclaims that they are now part of the Triumph Motorcycle Group. Now, Osset themselves were founded in 2004. Owner Ian Smith apparently wanted to build an electric off-roader for his son. They are now based in St Leonard's, which is in East Sussex, and they build electric motorbikes for children and youths. Both bikes simply for sort of fun riding, but also for competition. And the machines are said to have won multiple youth championships around the world, and the sales are significant, 40,000 bikes worldwide. And Triumph CEO Nick Bloor said, "We're excited about the opportunity of joining force with Osset Bikes, a dynamic brand that has been encouraging children into motorcycling for many years and have been at the forefront of developing electric trials bikes for fun and competition. Whilst the two brands will continue working independently, Triumph and Osset will collaborate on new state-of-the-art products to inspire young riders into off-road riding across the segments that Triumph and Osset will have a presence in, drawing on their respective strengths to build the best bikes in the world." Now, interestingly, if you do go onto their website and have a dig around, you'll find one of these machines. This is the 24.0, as it's called, racing. And whilst they produce bikes for riders as young as 3, I note that this machine is actually said to be suitable not just for teenagers, but also for adults up to 90 kilograms in weight. And it's priced at a very reasonable £3,399. Now, it's currently fitted with a 48 volt, 20 amp hour lithium battery, and that spins a 1400 watt motor, and it operates via 3 setting power adjuster, so you can basically set how the bike responds to the rider. Now, all up weight, as you expect from a machine like this, is pretty featherweight. No real equipment on it, is there? 48.5 kilos or 107 pounds as near as damn it. And the bike gets preload and compression adjustment at the rear, with compression adjustable forks at the front. Now the bike is supplied with softer springs for lighter riders out of the crate, but it also comes with included harder springs for heavier riders. Now the wheels are fairly standard 19-inch front and 17-inch rear on the alloy rims, discs front and rear stop it, and seat height say low 670 millimeters, 26 inches. Now my immediate thought, actually looking at that, was it might not need a lot of scaling up to cope with bigger, heavier riders. And if it were fitted with basic road legal equipment, lights, indicators, mirrors, and so forth, and probably ABS would be required. You certainly need CBS if it was going to be road legal, depends on the power output. You've got an instant electric trail bike there. So there is some thinking to be done, I suspect, on where that particular model is going, but it looks interesting anyway. Now, finally, on to today's better biking tip. This one is all about overtaking on cross-hatchings, and once upon a time I was told that overtaking on cross-hatched areas indicated a full understanding of the highway code. People seem to be pretty proud that they know that what the rules are on overtaking on cross-hatchings. Now, I will also say that when I talked about this issue on my Facebook page a few years ago, Nikki came back to me and said that I can honestly say never once in any advanced training that I've done have I been encouraged to overtake on cross-hatchings, and I've done quite a bit now with different observers and instructors. So different experiences there. But just look at what riders do on the road. Head out and you won't take you long to see another rider passing slower vehicles on these marked areas. So is it a good idea? Is it even legal? So first things first, over to the highway code to get some definitions. That's always the best place to start. Now, what the highway code actually says is areas of white diagonal stripes or chevrons painted on the road are there to separate traffic lanes or to protect traffic turning right. So let's get chevrons out of the way first. So this is what I'm talking about. You'll see that the chevrons are V-shaped markings, and you'll also see that they are bounded by a solid line. And the code quite clearly states, if the area is marked with chevrons and bordered with solid white lines, you must not enter it except in an emergency. Now, where do you find chevrons? Well, there's one obvious example. That's a motorway slip road. That's the on-ramp. But the implication is clear. You must stay in lane until you reach the broken line, which is somewhere up there beyond the white van in the distance. And the same, of course, applies at an exit slip road. If you were coming off at the matching slip road on the other side of the motorway, again, it's bounded by a solid line around those chevrons, and you must stay off them. So the implication is that you are committed once you are alongside those chevrons. You must not cross them. You either follow the slip road off or you stay on the main carriageway. Cutting across is illegal, even if you realize that you're in the wrong lane or because there's a queue ahead merging slowly into the traffic that you want to skip. So I see riders using areas marked with chevrons to pass queues, and I even had a rider do that on a post-test course with me. Now, he was totally unaware of the distinction between them. So let's move on to the other diagonal markings, the ones that are commonly caused cross-hatchings. Now, here's an example. If the area is bordered by a broken white line, you should not enter the area unless it is necessary and you can see that it's safe to do so. So necessary and safe, that's a can of worms in itself, deciding what constitutes necessary and what constitutes safe. Now, one thing I would say is that hardly any riders are aware that the line bounding the cross-hatched area is a little bit more obvious here, as it's straight down the middle of a straight with the road, is actually the hazard line. Now, the name should give you a clue. There is a hazard somewhere ahead, you just aren't told what it is. So whilst the hazard line doesn't say don't cross, it does suggest we should be thinking a little bit harder. Yeah, many riders really don't think twice about using the cross-hatched area like this as a motorcycle overtaking lane. I even heard, I'm sorry to say, an advanced instructor, someone who really should have known a lot better given his background, actually call these markings overtaking lanes for motorcycles. Now, as so often, of course, my own take is somewhat different on this. Since they are effectively wide hazard lines, I tend to think twice about using them. Now, you may think that overcautious, but I've seen far too many near misses involving riders overtaking and cross-hatched areas. And here are some real life examples that I have personally witnessed for myself. Now, let me get the next picture up. This is a diagram that I drew earlier, so it may not be entirely clear. Hopefully you can see what I've tried to represent there. It's a shallow angled Y junction formed where a main road bypasses a village. So this is the main road is out here, going up around the corner here, and the village is entered by a narrower road over to here. So effectively, the old road goes straight on off the new road, and it's the new road that veers off to the left from the bottom of the screen. And that's the problem. Drivers heading into the village from the direction of the bottom of the screen, where you can see I've marked out a red sort of blob which represents a car, tend to cut straight across the hatched areas to make their route into the right turn nice and easy. Now, what happened in this particular case was there happened to be a vehicle with a bike behind it approaching from the opposite direction, and the rider assumed that the driver would turn neatly into the marked refuge and committed himself to overtaking after passing the refuge, a manoeuvre I've heard described, incidentally, as perfectly safe. Now, unfortunately, of course, what happened was the driver didn't go as far as the refuge and then move into it. He just stuck his indicator on and at exactly the same moment moved into the cross-hatched area. I dare say it's the sort of thing that many riders would have done too. But of course, the result of this was a near head-on collision. It was a very, very near miss, and presumably one very shocked driver and one very shocked rider. Okay, what other examples have I got? Well, the fact is that the cross-hatched areas also tend to protect roadside furniture from motorists and bikes. Now, I zoom in on this particular picture. Now, what you can see is, if I just try to zoom in a little, and you can see the cross-hatched area in the middle there, and you can also see the two speed roundels. Now, I was riding along this very road, and a motorcyclist came up alongside me and paused for a moment, and then saw the cross-hatched area and went straight for an overtake past the lorry that I was following into the village here. It's not a high speed limit. What he didn't know, I did know because it's a road I used a lot, was that just where those speed roundels are, if I try and zoom in a little bit more closely, what you should be able to make out is there is actually a traffic island in the middle of it. Thanks to Mr. Google and his flying aeroplane, we can see what the problem is there. Now, he didn't know they were there. He couldn't see them when he committed to the overtake because he was too close to the lorry, and they were hidden by the slight curve in the road. And he had to take some evasive action, and he ended up swerving to the wrong side of the road to get around them. So marked off areas actually do sometimes help protect us from obstacles like that in the middle of the road, but they also often protect us from protruding curbs and traffic calming measures generally. Now, some years ago, I stopped to see if I could help a Kawasaki rider who was actually minus a sump. What he'd done was attempted to ride up the inside of a queue on a cross-hatched area, only to discover that partway up the queue, a curb jutted out into his path and narrowed the road. I'm not quite sure why he hadn't seen it, but he'd run into it, of course. He'd shattered the belly pan on the bike, damaged the exhaust, and also cracked the lower engine casing. So the engine was rather sadly dribbling out its lifeblood all over the road. Now, interestingly, that particular area of diagonal markings was also bounded by a solid line. And I'm sure you know how you should treat a solid line. Solid lines around diagonal cross-hatchings should be treated just like any other solid line. It means do not cross. And just because there's an expensive empty road surface available to ride on doesn't mean that we actually have access to it. Now, if you head out on the A4, out towards Severnake Forest. It's a lovely, lovely stretch of road. It's beyond Reading, so it's lovely and quiet. And there's a short stretch of cross-hatchings with a solid line around them both sides. And why, you might be asking? Well, the answer is because the road is actually wide enough to promote down the middle overtaking. It's not just bikes, incidentally, cars do it too there. And this particular stretch approaches a far from obvious blind crest. So overtake in that particular place and you could meet someone doing the same from the opposite direction. And guess what I saw a motorcycle doing on that stretch of cross-hatchings just a few weeks ago? Yep, overtaking, of course. And final point about overtaking on hatched areas of any sort, consider the road surface too. As it's rarely swept by other vehicles, it's where there are most likely to be tyre puncturing debris found. So there we go. That's something for you to think about today. That's the all I want to say on that one. Nick's looked in and said hello, which is nice to see you, Nick. And Kevin has said re-broken line hatching rarely, but it depends. Never on solid border. Yes, okay, so I've just made that distinction as I finished the point. Yeah, if there's a solid line around it, it is definitely a no-no. If there's a broken line around it, think twice. Right, that is it for today. Just a final reminder that we do have the live webcast event, the cornering and fixing cornering problems. And the idea of this particular talk is to talk about what goes wrong in corners, what you can do to avoid things going wrong in corners if you possibly can, and how you can correct cornering errors when you've made them. And the idea is that if you've done cornering training, what this will do is it will give you an insight into how to use the skills that you've been taught. One thing we never teach people on training courses is how to crash. And in fact, in my opinion, that's the missing link when it comes to advanced training. So that's on Wednesday, I forgot what the date it is again. Yeah, I'll get it right in a minute. 6th of July at 10 p.m., 8 p.m. in the evening. Tickets are £5 for that, and the August event, the first Wednesday in August, will be Science of Being Seen, and it's the full presentation. So do sign up for that if you are interested, and try to encourage other people to come along. These are very practical sessions that I deliver on the webcast, so I really do hope we get a few people in to listen along and learn something and give me some feedback on those as well. There's always room for questions on those. Right, that is it. So thank you very much indeed again for looking in today. Do, if you are out on the bike, stay shiny side up, and do keep an eye on the weather forecast. Sadly, it looks like these beautiful blue skies aren't going to last to the weekend. So from me, Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, thanks for tuning in to Elevenses, and I'll hopefully see you again on the next show, which will be on Sunday.